Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a lamb orzo bowl with some zucchini, tomatoes, fresh herbs, got a lamb roast that we're going to chop up. And then we're going to make some oatmeal cookies because my son was like, "Oh mom, can you make a cookie?" And I was like, "Sure." And oatmeal is what he picked. So let's start by getting our orzo pasta going, and then we will kind of start prepping our dough for our cookies and also season up our meat. So we're not going to use this full bag of orzo. I know it may look tiny to you, but orzo really puffs up a lot more than you would say rice does. So we're going to use about half of it, and that should be more than enough for our family for lunch. So we're going to put it in my pot of water here. And then since I'm going to be using some of my stock, or a little bit, not, I don't know why I keep calling it stock, but some of my starchy water for my pot or for the orzo like kind of sauce, I'm going to add a little bit of salt in here, about a teaspoon or so. And then we're going to give it a nice stir just so we don't have any of those kind of stick to the bottom. And we'll let that boil up. And then we are going to prep up our lamb here. We're going to cube it up. That way we can be done with our meat board. So this, I had actually, it was like a 6.5 pound lamb roast. So I cut it in half because, we're not having everyone this week. My oldest daughter is off taking a class at Vanderbilt, like college class. And then my parents are going to Vienna. So I am only cooking for 6 with several of them being little. So it's a smaller meals. I'm going to take off the fat off of my lamb. If you were going to use it in a roast in the oven, the fat is perfect. But since I'm going to be sauteing this in the pan, I don't need all that fat on there. It will just end up being chewy. So I'm just going to try to take it off as much as possible in here. And then we'll kind of cube this up because what I'm going to do is I'm going to just saute the lamb chunks up nice with some nice seasonings, but do like a really fast, quick saute on them. And they'll be lovely and go well with the orzo pasta that we're kind of doing like a Greek theme with. Now with lamb, it's actually a really tender meat, and it doesn't get as stiff as if you were using some of beef roast or whatnot when you do a saute on it. And it will play really well we're going to do some oregano and basil and parsley kind of as our seasonings, and a little bit of onion, salt, and Worcestershire. So I'm just making nice little small kind of bite-sized pieces because that's what we're going to have on top of our pasta for our orzo bowl. Here we go. And you could always, if you wanted to sub out, if you didn't have like say lamb chunks, I mean, you could always use beef or chicken for this. You could even actually do like little burgerettes with some ground lamb, which would be lovely. But I know lamb is not a super common thing eaten in like the States, but it is a really lovely meat. And we always like to kind of change up our proteins. Okay, this one, we're going to get a lot of that fat off. And trust me, don't think that you're wasting food by cutting off the fat. It's not going to be good to eat. And so you'll probably ended up leaving it on your plate. But if you cut it off now, it's going to make your end product nicer. Here we go. Get a little bit of this fat off. Luckily with lamb, it's pretty easy to kind of cut. It's not a super stiff meat. I got this from Costco. Although I know all these, you can get great lamb from Publix as well. This one, you can get a really big lamb roast, and it's kind of great to kind of cut in half and use it different ways. Here we go. Again, just kind of cut off any of this white stuff. That's the fat. It's going to be really chewy. And then we'll season. Using that. I'm going to have to wash that bottle now. Okay, let's get these guys. Now, my knife that I'm using is a cleaver. And cleavers are great for just cutting meat. So they're really big, the width right here. It gives you enough heft when you're pressing down to kind of slice through the meat. I will say I didn't get a cleaver until, I want to say it was 7 or 8 years ago. And I have loved it ever since I got it. I didn't realize how much of a difference it was going to make in cutting up meat.
But you have a question? Does lamb need to be fully cooked like chicken, or is it more like beef?
It's more like beef, so you can have it more of a medium rare and whatnot. So you don't have to worry about as much as that, like with chicken and pork where you have to really cook it all the way. And lamb, if you've never had it, it has a little bit more of a gamey flavor, but it's not super strong. And I find that, like, depending on what spices you put it on, it pairs really well. Like today, we're doing oregano and basil, but I also find that sage is a really great spice with lamb. I feel like its earthiness really pairs well with the kind of gamier flavor of lamb. Just get some of these. There we go. Now let's get through. We'll chop these off, get this started marinating. And I will say, lamb chops are also delicious and lamb lollies, but they are, again, more expensive. A big kind of roast like this, kind of about the same price as, a chuck roast or whatnot. It's pretty decently priced. This was about $30 for 6.5 pounds. So really reasonable price piece of meat. Okay. Take that last bit off, and then we're going to throw this in there. So we got this in our bowl, and then we're going to prep up our herbs for this. And then I'm going to take that Worcestershire with me and give it a quick wash. There we go. Say, at least I didn't drop it. Okay, so we got our lamb here. We're gonna actually use some of our Worcestershire right now. I'm not gonna super drench it in it because I don't want it to be too wet of a marinade, because we are gonna do a kind of a saute on this. So just about a tablespoon or so. The acids in the Worcestershire are gonna actually blend really nicely with the fat, the natural fat in the meat, and it will just make it nice and juicy. We're gonna give it a good shake of garlic salt. So you want about a teaspoon and a half. And then we're going to use some onion powder because I want a drier, again, more of a drier seasoning on it. And we're going to use about a tablespoon of onion powder. And then I have some dried oregano that we're going to use, as well as I'm going to cut up some fresh oregano in here. But the dried, I think, helps stick on the flavors a little bit better. And then I've got my fresh oregano. We're going to use some of it here, and then some of it's going to go in our orzo pasta. So with the oregano, if you're picking it fresh from your garden, you're going to have to de-leave it. So you just kind of pull off the leaves, because that stem, while it does have some flavor in it, it will be chewy and not appetizing to eat. So I just kind of do a quick little pull of the leaves off. Just grab on the top and then slide down. It's kind of the quickest way. There's no other way really to do it outside of hand pulling the leaves off. But fresh oregano is delicious. I actually have two kinds here. I have just the regular one and then Greek oregano, which have pretty similar flavors. But, when I see it, I just got to buy it all. So we're going to do a nice little mince up of our fresh oregano. That way chopping it up will bring out as much of the flavors as possible. So this is going to give me about a tablespoon. And it will work well with our dried oregano. And then we're going to add in just a little bit of garlic with the juices too. So about half a tablespoon. And then I'm going to give this a nice stir, and we're going to just let it kind of sit and marinate while we prep up our cookies. And here we go. Give it a nice little stir. Actually, probably chop up my onion real quick and have it start to saute for our little thing. And lamb will actually cook up pretty quickly when it's cut in little bite-sized pieces. So you don't have to worry about having to cut it for a long time. Let's do a quick slice up on our onion here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to saute up the onion, and then we'll do the tomatoes and add our tomatoes in. I'm going to do a blistering of the tomatoes, and then we'll take them out and we'll add the saute up the zucchini and yellow squash. That way when we assemble our bowl, we can have our little components on it. So really simple, long, skinny slice on it because I want it to be a bit more stringy. And I'm going to turn on my skillet over here. Actually, I'm going to do it in this one so that I can cook the meat and that oil juices that are left, or in the onion juices that are left. So we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then I'm going to let this start to kind of cook up. I'm going to get my tongs, kind of spread them out, and then we're going to work on our oatmeal cookies. So I do have my oven preheated to 375 degrees. There we go. We'll let these kind of cook up. Give my hands a quick rinse so they don't have an onion flavor to them. And now we're going to start with our oatmeal cookies. Now we do just plain oatmeal in this house. Nobody in our house is a fan of the raisins. So we do oatmeal. Sometimes if I'm feeling it, a chocolate chip in there. But most of the time, just plain is what everyone likes. So we're going to start with 2.5 sticks of butter, which is 1 1/4 cups. I have them softened or a little bit like room temperature. I'm going to let them cream for a second. And as they're creaming, we are going to add in our brown sugar and our regular sugar. So we're going to add in 3/4 a cup of brown sugar. So I'm going to pack it in because when you use brown sugar, unless the recipe states otherwise, you always want to pack it in because it is a fluffier sugar. So just make sure you pack it in. So I want 3/4 of cup. I'm using a 1/2 measuring cup here. So we got 3/4. And then we're going to use in a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. Let me crunch it. There we go. And then I'm going to fill this up with a 1/2 cup. And then we're going to let these cream. And we want to make sure all that butter and that sugar gets mixed together. Give my hands a quick rinse. We'll give it a good mix around. Get those incorporated. My butter wasn't completely room temperature, so it might need a little extra mixing. Now, room temperature butter creams much better than regular ones, which will, we want them nice and creamed up for our oatmeal cookies. And but I forgot to set out my butter yesterday after going to the store, so we're going to be mixing it a little bit longer. There we go. So here I've got my butter and my sugar. Of course, little piece over there. My butter and my sugar creamed up, which means if you look at it, they've formed a single like homogeneous paste where they're all blended together. So this is what creaming means. Now we're going to add in our egg. So I've got 1 egg. I'm going to let that cream for a second. And while that's creaming, I'm going to stir my Orzo and give it a little taste, see how it is. I can already tell it still needs a few more minutes. I'm gonna mix this. I'm gonna use my spatula here and push down any of it that's stuck on the side of my stand mixer. Otherwise, you won't mix up evenly. What you'll have is this butter sugar kind of stuck on one side. There we go. Give it a quick cream. Perfect. Let's give our onions a quick toss over here. These we're sauteing up for our lamb orzo bowls.
Yeah, question. Did your parents eat all the food that you made them while you were on vacation?
They did. They wasn't enough to keep them for the whole time. At least I think there was plenty for my mom because she joined us at the lake house, my sister's lake house. But my stepdad has a healthy appetite, and I think he enjoyed himself and probably stopped to get some chicken wings at Publix. For some reason, he loves the Publix chicken wings. I think he probably had enough food, but he wanted those anyways. But yes, it almost got them all the way through. Okay, we've got our egg in here. Now we're going to add in our vanilla, our baking soda, our nutmeg, our cinnamon, and our salt. So for vanilla, we want 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we're going to dry that out. And then we're going to use a teaspoon of baking soda. And make sure I don't have any big clumps in it. And then a heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. Got to have that nice cinnamon flavor. If your cinnamon is old, you might need even more. Spices, they don't go bad, but they dull out over time. So the longer they've been open and have been exposed to air, then they have less of a flavor. And then we need just the tiniest the tiniest bit of nutmeg. So 1/4 teaspoon. Nutmeg has a really strong flavor, so you don't want to go too much, but I find that this is like the missing ingredient in most oatmeal cookies. So 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. We're going to cream these together and get those spices mixed in. There we go. Let those cream for a second. And I'm going to give my onions a nice little thing. We want these to get nice and caramelized. So I've got them over about a medium heat. And we're going to let them kind of get golden brown. Okay, now that we've got... Oh, you know what I forgot to add in? Some salt. You need about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm just using... I had this pink Himalayan sea salt that we had on our camping trip. And I'm like using it up. Here we go. Now we are going to add in our flour and then our oats. And then we have our base for our cookies. So we are going to add in 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You don't want to use a bread flour. You want to use all-purpose, and don't use self-rising because that has added baking soda or baking powder in it. I think it's baking powder. So 1.5 cups. We're going to let this mix together. And now I'm going to check on my orzo, see if it is ready. Orzo takes a lot longer to cook than most people realize. Even though it's a teeny tiny pasta. Still needs more. It's a little firm. But it's a great one. It's a very small one. But it takes up all the flavor of your sauce. So you're getting more sauce to pasta ratio, which I think is always a win. Okay, we've got our base to our oatmeal cookies. And now we're going to add in 3 cups of old-fashioned oats. I always use old-fashioned because it's the only one I buy, but quick oats work well for this. Do not use a rolled steel oat, like a steel oat or steel cut oats. Those are going to be really hard and chewy, and your cookies just won't turn out well for it. So we need 3 cups of oats. 1, 2, and 3. We'll give this a quick mix. We'll let those incorporate. Wow. Look at this. They are getting nice and golden. I am going to heat up some oil in my pan here so that we can blister our tomatoes here in just a second. We want about 1.5 tablespoons. Here we go. Look at our gorgeous oatmeal cookie dough. Now you can always add in chocolate chips, cranberries, raisins, white chocolate chips, nuts, anything under the sun that you like. This would be when you would mix it in now. But we like ours just plain Jane. And this is one of those cookie doughs that I don't chill. So some cookie doughs, like my chocolate chip, white chocolate macadamia nut, there's some of them that I chill for at least 30 minutes to an hour before mixing, like baking up. Oatmeal, you don't need to. Okay, I've got those oats in. We'll spread those out. They're only going to need about 8 minutes to bake. So I'm going to move this to the side and we'll start rolling them out. But let's get our tomatoes sliced so that we can have them blistering up. So I have just got a collection of tomatoes here. I had some like a melody that I hadn't used up. And then I've got a couple Campari tomatoes. I went a little crazy on my tomato purchases when I was at the stores because everything looks so good and I just love tomatoes and I'm yearning for my plants to start producing. I have got 1 tomato growing. It's kind of sad. I look like over at my neighbor's and she's got like 50 tomatoes on her and I'm like, what is in her soil? I've always had it, I think, because my backyard doesn't get a whole lot of sun, so it takes them a little bit longer before they get to like fruition in there. But when they do come, it's like nonstop tomatoes, but it's typically not until like the very end of July, beginning of August, and then I'll have tomatoes all the way until October. But then it's tomato time. I've got lots of flowers on my cucumber plants, my cucumber plants. So hopefully those will be producing soon. Now I'm just slicing my Campari ones. I'm just quartering. My little ones I put in half. I'm going to blister them, which is kind of heating them over a nice high heat. I'm going to turn this down, but to where they're going to sizzle and pop. And I like to cut them so they don't like explode on me. There we go.
Apparently you're not alone. One person only has 2 tomatoes so far. Another only has 1.
Okay, good. I'm not alone in the fact that they have not shown anything. So this is called blistering. I have this on really high heat and oil. We're going to let them kind of cook really fast on both sides, but we're not going to cook them very long to where they put out a lot of their flavor, like their juices. So they'll be like a semi-cooked, but they'll have like a blistered effect on them. But it will be delicious. We're going to assemble kind of our ingredients for everything. There we go. We're getting almost on our sauteed there. So here, I'll show you what I mean by blister. Do you see how the skin is just kind of crackled a little bit? Almost like a blister. It's not the most appetizing way, but they're delicious. So we've got our blistered tomatoes. I'm going to do a little quick over of garlic salt so they have a nice little flavor. And then we're gonna remove these. That's all we're doing was a like 1 minute high heat cook on them. Because again, we don't want them to let out all of their juices. But what's left in this pan will be great on our, like we're gonna cook up our zucchini and our yellow squash in it. So we've got our blistered tomatoes, which are delicious. Which is nice because a lot of times if you overcook tomatoes, you know, they just kind of fall apart. These will kind of hold their shape and their body. Give this a little stir. Let's start kind of cooking out. Let's chop up and then we're going to roll out our cookies. They only need about 8 minutes to cook up. Okay, we've got our zucchini here and our yellow squash. It's a tiny yellow squash, but I prefer actually zucchini over yellow squash, although they're very similar. And it's simply because I think zucchini has more body and less seeds, while yellow squash, I think, gets a little soggy because they have a really seedy middle. But both are great summer squashes. Here we go. And then I'm going to quarter it. And then we'll slice them up. So I'm keeping them kind of thick because if you cut them too thin, they'll just kind of shred apart. I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic to our oil and tomato over here. I'll let this kind of saute up. Let's bring out those flavors for just a second. There we go. Now we've kind of got our caramelization on our onions. This golden brown color to it is bringing out the natural sugars in the onion, which will give it a sweet and savory flavor, which is, I feel like, one of the best ways to have onions. And this will go great on our bowl. But you want to use a yellow onion or a Valdalia onion for this. Red onions just lose all their flavor when you fry them up or do them. They're better eaten raw. And same with white onions. They kind of lose their picante taste to them. There we go. So we've got our onions right there. I'm going to turn this off right now. And we're going to add in our zucchini and our yellow squash. We're going to kind of let them saute up. I'm going to turn my heat back on to about a 6. I'm going to stir them once to kind of coat them in all of that oil because zucchini and yellow squash are kind of like sponges. So they're going to soak everything up, and I'm going to add just a bit more olive oil. There we go. And we're going to let these saute for a minute, and then we're going to add some fresh herbs to them as well. Some oregano and parsley. Be delicious. Okay, let's get our cookies rolled out. I said not really rolled out, but balled out. And then I'm just going to, before I do that, let me check our Orzo just to make sure, but I still think it needs a little bit of time. But it's starting to bubble up when it bubbles, which means it's getting close. Actually done right now. Remember, I'm going to reserve a little bit of my broth or my starchy water to add in with our kind of our sauce that we're going to make. It's going to be kind of a light tomato sauce with it. And I say light tomato as I'm going to use a little bit of tomato paste and then olive oil. So very simple. I need about a cup of it. And then I'm going to turn this back one. We're going to strain it. Make sure your colander doesn't have super big holes or slits because you'll lose your Orzo then. There we go. So I've got my Orzo. We're going to leave it right here. And then I'm just going to give it a light drizzle of olive oil over it. You don't need much. This is just going to help prevent it from sticking together, which we'll be tossing in here. And this Orzo will be delicious with our pasta. Let me grab a little spoon to kind of give it a little stir. But you can see how much bigger in size it gets. You know, when we first put it in, it was like a fifth of that size. It looked more like a grain of rice. Okay, let's get our cookies cooking. So what I do with these is I kind of just grab a ball. We're doing about, I would say, ping pong, maybe gumball size. I don't know, my husband's saying that my sizing is a little off. We're doing jawbreaker. I don't know. Like 1-inch balls. He's saying we're doing this size. Whatever you guys want to. Golf ball? I feel like golf balls are bigger than that. I think they're gumball size. Apparently, he uses really little golf balls, but you know what? He hasn't golfed in a while, so. Okay, well, tiny baby golf balls. I'm gonna find a golf ball here. I think ping pong is smaller than a golf ball. We'll get our official names, but you're just gonna give them a little roll. These cookies aren't gonna spread out too much, which is nice because they give you a chewier oatmeal one. These aren't gonna be your crispy oatmeal cookies. These are nice and chewy. So we're gonna give them a nice roll. Try to get them all about the same size. And the rolling is just gonna give you a more perfect circle when they bake up. You could use your 2 spoons and scoop them, but this dough isn't super sticky. So I always do a little roll. And it is a really delicious dough to eat. My kids love it. Though I'm sure they'll be like, oh, can we lick the bowl? And when they say, can we lick the bowl, it's before I've baked my second batch and they just eat it all. We'll get these. And then you just cook these at 375 for 8 minutes. So they don't cook very long and not on super high heat. But you do want to make sure oven is preheated all the way. I think a lot of problems with cookies is people overcook them and then they get dried out and they're crunchy instead of chewy. So 9 minutes, even if you don't think they're done, trust me, they're done. They'll cook a little bit more as you sit. So we've got it. I'm using my big sheet, which is actually a sheet and a half, which allows me to do a lot more cookies. And when you're a big family, being able to utilize your whole cookie sheet or your whole oven is perfect. So I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse. And then we're going to pop these in the oven at 375 for 8 minutes. And then I always do, we're doing this just a top rack, but if you ever bake 2 sheets of cookies at the same time, your top rack always finishes up first because this is blocking the heat from getting to it. So your one, you'll have to bake it for about a minute or 2 longer. We put 8 minutes in. Timer set is going. One time I turned off my oven instead of pushing start. So I'm always very careful now. Let's give our zucchini here a quick little stir. And then I'm going to start heating up my pan again for our lamb. We have a little bit of this onion oil in there that we sauteed in. That will add some great flavor to our lamb. I'm just going to add a little bit more. And we're going to cook our lamb up in batches because you don't want to do it all at the same time, because what will happen is the meat will seize and the juices will come out and you won't get a good like sear on it. But while we are waiting for that, let's prep up our spices. I got more oregano here. There we go. We're going to throw some of these in with our zucchini, give them a nice little flavoring. And then my basil and my parsley are going to go in with my orzo pasta. So we'll get this nice and minced up. Now, I think fresh herbs are wonderful, and they really, I feel like, make a meal seem brighter, more summery. But if you don't have fresh, dried always works. But when using dried, most of the time, the rule of thumb is you're going to use less than the amount of fresh, because when it dries, it shrinks up more. So you'll use less of it to get the same kind of flavor. So this is about a tablespoon of fresh oregano diced up. And I always measure it after I've chopped it up, not just the whole leaf form. So we've got about a tablespoon. So if you are using dried, you probably only need about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half to kind of get that same flavor.
You have a question. What type of cutting board is that?
This is just a good old-fashioned plastic cutting board that I have had since I was in college. I got it as a Secret Santa gift back in like 2008 or 7 maybe. So I've loved this one. They don't make it anymore, but it is my favorite. I have ones that are similar to it that I have on my Amazon storefront. There's like a collection of 3 that are kind of big like this, but this is a OG model, but I love it because it's so big and it's not heavy. We're going to put our lamb in. And again, I'm making sure I'm not crowding any of it. We're going to have to do this in 2 batches. So you want every piece to kind of have its spot on the bottom of your pan so it can sear up. There we go. Put a little bit more right here. Okay. You can even smell the smell. It smells wonderful. So our zucchini is just about ready here. Our zucchini and yellow squash. So our summer squash medley. I'm going to just give it a little bit of garlic salt. Season it up. And stir it here. Now you can see where I'm sauteing it to where we've got some nice browning on the edges, but I'm making sure not to go to where it's mushy. So high heat for a shorter amount of time. You're just going to go to where you stop seeing the bright white of the skin and you have more of a muted yellow, light brown. You don't want to overcook them. Then you're going to have mushy zucchini versus leaving them, cooking them right up until that point before it. And knowing that I'm going to take them out and the heat will still cause them to kind of sweat and cook up some more. I'm going to add this to my tray. This is going to be our building blocks for our bowl. I'm going to slide my onions over. That way the kids can put on what they love. Me, I'm going to put on everything because it's delicious. And my husband will probably put on nothing except the meat and the orzo. Maybe the orzo. Maybe just the meat. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil to this. About a teaspoon and a half. And let's get our meat to flipping. Look at this beautiful sear that we're getting on it. That's doing that high heat. And remember, we did more of a drier kind of marinade on it, so it wouldn't sweat out too much. Now, the trick with lamb is you don't want to overcook it. So I cooked it on the first time where I started to see all the pink kind of disappearing. And now we're just going to do a really quick sear on the other side. Now, this is going to give me about a medium rare, which is what we want. We don't want a too, I like it nice and tender. But you could cook it longer. Let's see, we got 2.5 minutes left on our cookies. Got like perfect timing here today. Okay. I'm going to get ready to take out this batch in just a second here. I've got my oil over here. I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic. About a teaspoon. I love my garlic. Let me turn this down to low so it can kind of infuse in that oil before we add our tomato paste. Let's get these guys out. And again, they should be hopefully about a medium rare, a little bit of pink in the middle. That way they're really tender. They will continue to cook a little bit longer as they sit on my plate here. But we're going to do them in stages because, like I said, if you try to fry them all up at one time, what happens is you're going to get all the juices out and it won't leave you with a nice crispy sear on it like this. You put them all in at once, then they won't have that good sear. Let's add in this next batch. And again, making sure they have their own spot on your bottom of your saute pan or your frying pan. I'm using a hex-clad non-stick. I love it because, like I said, it does keep it non-stick for it, which is nice, but you could also use a cast iron that you've heated up well, or your regular pan. Just make sure it's well heated before you add on your meat. If you add your meat to a cold frying pan, again, you won't get that nice sear on it, and you'll get more of a juicy mess. Okay, we've got our lamb searing up there. We've seasoned that again with oregano, onion powder, and Worcestershire salt. Now let's get our tomato paste in here. I'm going to give a good squeeze. I love the tomato paste in these little tubes because you don't use a lot of tomato paste at a time. We're going to do about a tablespoon of tomato paste. Tomato paste has a lot of flavor, and I want this to be a light, very light tomato flavor to my broth. So we're going to let that kind of season up, let it crisp up, but I hear our oatmeal cookies are calling us. Okay. Now look at those gorgeous oatmeal cookies. Now, like I say, people always say, oh, they need to cook longer. They don't. These are going to give you the perfect soft, chewy cookie. If you cook them longer, then they're going to get crunchy and they firm up. Perfect. You don't want them to split apart. If you cook them longer, you're going to burn them on the bottom. You just let them sit. That's the thing. You take them out 8 minutes. You've got them all down. You're going to let them sit for 5 minutes. Then they will have firmed up and they will be soft but chewy, and they stay that way for days. These are great. These are a favorite one that we have. It's like 3 cups of oats in there. It's got a perfect blend. You can add chocolate chips or craisins or raisins if you want, but we like them simple. But the secret is the cinnamon and the pinch of nutmeg. That's always the missing ingredient. Okay, we've got our tomatoes here. This is our tomato paste. And now how we reserved some of our starchy water. We're going to add this in a little bit at a time. I'm going to turn this up a little bit higher now. And we're going to just smush it until it rehydrates. There we go. You don't want to flood it too much. Just a little bit at a time. That way we can deglaze some of these herbs off of the bottom of our pan. There we go. We'll add a little bit more in just a second. These are about ready. You see how you can start to see the pink disappear? That's when I know it's about time to flip them. You want to try to minimize the amount of stirring you get so you can have that nice sear on it. While those, we've got our fresh basil and our parsley that we are going to mince up, and we're going to throw this into our broth that we have. It looks like we've got a good little bubble over here. So let me add in the last bit. Give it a stir. I'm going to turn it down. And then we're going to add in our orzo. This is going to soak up some of that broth into it. It's going to add a nice flavor. And then we're going to dress it with our fresh herbs and a little bit of garlic salt. So it's got a very mild tomato flavor, but it's just so delicious. Okay, I've got this nice and low simmering. And now let's get our fresh basil and parsley chopped up. And this is going to add that really fresh, fragrant flavors. If you add it too soon, they kind of cook out. So you want to add it towards the very end. And I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to flip my meat because it is looking about perfect. Look at that. We've got this nice sear on the other side. which is perfect. That's what you get about, you can see when all the pink is disappearing, and we'll cook it for about 30 seconds to a minute on this other side. That way you still have that nice kind of medium rare in the middle, a nice tender things. But I will say, with lamb, even if you overcook it some, it doesn't get tough like beef does. It actually stays pretty tender. As compared to now, if you cook it forever, yes, it'll be tough, but it's one that is a bit more forgiving, especially for this cut. This is just a leg roast that I've chopped, cut up. So we're gonna let that sear off for just a second. Let's get our fresh herbs here. And so the reason I kept the basil and the parsley till the end is because they lose their flavors much faster versus oregano kind of retains its one. So I kind of cooked up my other stuff with the fresh oregano. Here we go. And just making sure we don't have any big leaves in there.
You have a question. Have you ever cooked professionally?
I have never cooked professionally. I just cook for my family, and I've been doing it since I was like 13 years old. I started cooking family dinners, and I have loved it ever since. It's a passion of mine, I will say. There we go. Look, we're going to stir in, and you can see almost all of that broth has been soaked up. So this orzo is going to have such a delicious flavor to it. And now we're just going to top it with a little bit of garlic salt. There we go. I'm going to turn this off. Let's get this going. And then I'm going to take these out and put them on my plate, because if I leave them in my skillet, the skillet is going to remain hot for a long time, which will continue to cook my meat. So I'm just going to scoop it out over here. That way it stays that nice medium rare that I love.
You ever request to make veal and peppers one day?
Oh, I'll have to try that. I've only used veal a few times because it's hard to come by at the grocery store. So I'll have to definitely look at that. There we go. And I'm all about using ingredients that you can access easily. Nothing's worse when you have to run around town for something. Let me get this little wiped up, and we're going to be building up our bowl, or kind of our, let me grab my cheese because we're going to have some cheese on it too.
You got a couple of requests of where you got the plates from?
Plates are Target. I think they're like, let me see. They don't make them anymore because when I bought them, so Threshold by Target. When I bought them, I only had 3 kids, and now I have 5 kids. And I bought only 8 of them. And 5 kids with my husband, that's 7, meaning we only have 1 spare if anyone breaks one. So I'm like, but they're my favorite. They are very heavy though, but I love them because you can actually put them in the oven. Okay, let's do it in a bowl, because this is a bowl. Nada. I love my bowls too, but ours is a bowl, so we'll put it in a bowl. Okay, we're going to start off with our herby orzo that we made using tomato paste. We have fresh basil and our fresh parsley in there, and we used our stock from not our starchy water from boiling the orzo to add the flavors. Then we are going to add in our sauteed zucchini and yellow squash that we added fresh oregano to, our caramelized onions, and then our blistered tomatoes. And then we will top it off with our chunks of pan-seared lamb that we also flavored with our oregano and onion powder and Worcestershire. And then we'll top it off with a little bit of shaved Parmesan cheese to kind of bring all of those kind of flavors together. And then definitely, let's not forget about these. I told you they needed just about a minute. Do you see how they are softened up right here? But look, you've still got that chewy, perfect cookie. These are the best cookies, guys. I love these. Well, Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just search for the title. This would be lamb and orzo pasta. And you can just watch along and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront there. So if you were interested in any of the pans or utensils we used, I have it all in my store. So this is like our 3-quart saute pan. I use my 12-inch Hexclad, but it's all in there. You guys can look around. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.